Hey guys, it's Retired at 40. We're starting down in the freeze drying room today, even though this is going to be a freeze dried pho video. And yeah, I said pho because I want to show you my new hobby. So gardening in the Midwest in the wintertime is not exactly real easy. So you kind of have to pick and choose what you want to grow. So I just started growing mushrooms. And I've got a couple that I think are ready. I'm really new to this, but these are going to be perfect in what we're making today. Some freeze-dried pho. So let's take these up to the kitchen. We're going to make some homemade pho, and then we're going to put it in. So pho is a very popular Asian dish, and in the last few years it's become really popular. You see restaurants that are just pho restaurants, and that's it. And it's relatively easy to make, but it doesn't include a lot of ingredients, so bear with me. Here's what you're gonna need. The key to a good pho is the broth, and that's the most important part. That's what gives it all of its flavor. So you're gonna need some onions, some ginger. You can do fresh ginger, or we like this squeeze bottle ginger. It's real handy. You're gonna need some garlic. You can do whole cloves or minced like this. You're gonna need some cinnamon sticks, some whole cloves or ground cloves, some star anise. I'll put the spelling right here for you. Sesame seed oil, some vegetable broth, coriander seeds, salt and pepper, 5 spice, and some lemongrass. So for the toppings, you're just gonna want to do the protein of your choice. We're doing tofu today. So you can do tofu, you see shrimp sometimes, you can do chicken. If you're doing tofu, you're gonna need some cornstarch. You're gonna need some rice noodles. There's a few different kinds of this. We're gonna use the angel hair, but they do make a thicker noodle as well. A little vegetable oil, some bean sprouts, then some mushrooms. These are optional. These are the freeze-dried mushrooms that I just showed you. You're gonna need some green onions or some scallions, some cilantro, and then for some optional toppings, you can also do some diced jalapenos, some lemon slices, and then some people do mint leaves as well. There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can do pho. You can add your own toppings. You can add little things here and there to your broth. Today we're freeze drying this, so that makes a difference. We need to make sure that everything is going to freeze dry. So for today's recipe, we're going to use the Instant Pot, and keep in mind that I am quadrupling this recipe. So if you're freeze drying this, you can follow my recipe. If you're just making it at home for whatever reason, you're going to want to cut it down to 1/4 of what I'm using. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our Instant Pot, we're going to do saute, and we're going to add a little oil. So we're going to use our sesame oil first, and we're going to need 8 teaspoons of sesame oil. And as a substitute for sesame oil, you can use vegetable oil as well. Next, we're going to add 12 of the star anise. And next we need cloves. So if you're doing ground cloves, you're going to want 1/2 teaspoon. If you're doing whole cloves, you're going to want about 20 whole cloves. Next we need 16 to 20 sticks of cinnamon. It's starting to smell real good in here. And then we need 4 teaspoons of coriander seeds. We're going to let this roast for just a minute, and then we're going to add some more ingredients. So then we want 2 teaspoons of garlic. All right, then we want 4 onions diced. That's a lot of onions. Next we need 2 inches of fresh ginger, or if you're using this kind of ginger, you're going to want 4 tablespoons. So you want to keep this on saute. You're going to give this all a good stir and get everything evenly dispersed around here, and then we're going to try and char these onions. Once those are done, you want about 7 or 8 stalks of lemongrass, 4 teaspoons of our 5 spice powder, some salt and pepper to taste, and then 16 cups of vegetable broth. So give it one last stir and mix all the ingredients together. Put your lid on. We're going to go to high pressure for 15 minutes, and we're on the way. So while we're waiting for our broth, this is the perfect time to get the tofu ready. If you're doing chicken or shrimp or something else instead, you can skip this step and just move ahead to when the broth is done. But you're going to want probably 2 to 3 pounds of meat if you're doing shrimp or chicken or whatever you're doing. Traditionally, tofu is what is used in pho, and if you're going to do tofu, you're going to need 2 to 3 containers. Usually they come in about a 14 to 16 ounce container of tofu. First, you're gonna wanna drain the tofu, and you can either do that by pushing it down and getting all the water out. You can squeeze it in between two towels, or you can just take two hard surfaces and push it together. You want this pretty firm and pretty dry. And then after your tofu is dry and firm, you just wanna cube all of the tofu like this. Once this is all cubed, you wanna throw it into a Ziploc bag. You're gonna add 1 teaspoon of cornstarch, and you're only gonna wanna do 1 brick of tofu at a time. And then you're just gonna flip the bag around and you're just gonna coat all of that tofu with cornstarch, because next we're gonna fry it up. Once we're at 0, we're gonna let this naturally release for 10 minutes. So normally I would pan fry this tofu, but since we have such a large amount for this recipe, I'm actually just gonna go into the oven with it. I'm gonna put the oven on 400. I'm gonna do 15 minutes on one side, and then we're gonna kind of flip everything and do 15 minutes on another side. After our 10 minutes is up, we're just gonna release all of the pressure out of the Instant Pot. You're gonna wanna get a strainer ready because we're gonna separate the solids from the liquids. That smells and looks delicious. So next we're just gonna pour this through a strainer because you wanna get all those big chunks out of there. And a lot of the big onion chunks as well. So we've separated solids from liquids because this is where all your flavor's at. This you can actually save, and a lot of times you can just do the whole process again and get a double whammy out of it. We're gonna take our rice noodles. That was an 8-ounce package that I started with. I did about half of those, and then these just need to soak in that hot water for about 15 minutes. So while we're soaking our noodles, I'm actually gonna put our dry garnishes, and I'm gonna spread them evenly across the trays. This is a medium freeze dryer with 4 trays. I'm doing about a cup of mushrooms. You can do quite a bit more. I'm gonna do 1 whole bunch of cilantro. And we're gonna do about 10 stalks of green onions or scallions. So then I'm gonna do about 4 cups of bean sprouts. So if you have other toppings that you want to add, now is the time to do it. If you're going to do jalapenos or a lemon slice or mint or whatever else you can think of. So before I add meat or tofu, I'm going to mix these kind of evenly across the trays. So the reason why I kind of want to get everything spread out as even as we can is the way I like to make these kind of in a formula. So that way if you have a cup of pho, you can add, you know, whatever it is, a cup of water, and we'll figure that out later in the video. All right, so it's time to add our liquids and our noodles. Try and get your rice noodles separated from your liquid and spread those evenly throughout the trays. And last, we're gonna put this liquid onto the trays. So normally I would fill up my liquid at the freeze dryer if I could. But in order to get a weight of this so we can get a formula down. Okay, so a Harvest Right tray weighs 1 pound, 10 ounces. That's for a medium tray. And with the food on there, we're at 3 pounds, 15 ounces. 3 pounds, 16 ounces. 4 pounds, 3 ounces. And 4 pounds, 7 ounces. Time to freeze. All done. In a little bit. All right, it's saying it's done. 25 hours, 26 minutes. It looks really good. I'm gonna double check it and make sure that it's done all the way through on all 4 trays, and we'll take them upstairs. So these look like they're all completely dry in 25 hours. That's pretty awesome. So I'm gonna weigh these again before I bag them, and then I'll save some out and make sure that we can add the correct moisture back in. So I've got 1 pound, 14 ounces on the first one, 1 pound, 15 ounces, 1 pound, 14 ounces, and 1 pound, 14 ounces. So really consistent across the board here. The first thing we're gonna need to do to figure out how much water to add in is we're gonna have to weigh out the portion that we're taking out for our sample. And it's 0.8 ounces. We're just gonna call it 1 ounce. The most important part of a freeze-dried video is the actual rehydration part, because you want to make sure that the food's going to rehydrate. So you need to figure out how much water goes back into the food. So the first thing that we need to know is that 4 medium trays weigh 6 pounds, 8 ounces. And our total weight with the food on the trays was 16 pounds, 9 ounces. That means we had 10 pounds and 1 ounce of food. And then after freeze drying, our total weight was 7 pounds, 9 ounces. Take our tray weight out. That gives us 1 pound, 1 ounce. And that means that 9 pounds of water was removed in the freeze drying process. So we need to figure out the ratio of 1 ounce to 1 pound, 1 ounces. And then we'll apply that ratio back to our 9 pounds of water weight, and that should give us the amount of water that we need to add back in. And that's gonna be roughly half a pound of water, which is gonna be 8 ounces. So 8.4 ounces is just about 1 cup. So I'm gonna heat up some water and get this really, really hot. And that means that if our calculation is correct, that 1 ounce of pho will be 1 cup of hot water. Now obviously with something like a soup, there's a lot of room for error because some soups are going to be a little bit more potent. Because with pho, there's a lot of different variables. The potency of it is different every time. You know, I've made it probably 20 times, and it's a little bit different every time, just depending on your spices and depending on how much flavor comes out into the broth, which is really where all the flavor comes from. So we'll start with about 3/4 of a cup. We'll work our way up, and then the 1 cup will just kind of be our baseline. Okay, 1 cup of hot water. Added very, very slowly. I'm gonna dunk those noodles and make sure everything gets in that hot water. I'm gonna let this hang out for a second because we've done tofu in the past and it does take a while to get into that tofu. So one thing to remember when you're making things like this, if you're gonna rehydrate them and you want them to rehydrate fast, is smaller pieces will always rehydrate a lot faster. All right, so first let's get a look at this. It looks really good to me. But let's see about the most important part, and that's how it tastes. The taste is all there. If you consider yourself a pho connoisseur, it's not 100%, mainly because you're not adding fresh stuff like mushrooms and sprouts and the cilantro. You're not adding that in fresh, you're rehydrating it so that's actually pulling in moisture that normally wouldn't pull in moisture. But all in all, I mean, I think it's about 90%. The taste is definitely there. A lot of the texture is there. And let's face it, this is a super, super easy thing to just throw some hot water on and you've got a meal. I also want to stress how much that the broth of this recipe is kind of the heart and soul of it. So if you want to add extra noodles, extra tofu, extra meat, extra mushrooms, whatever it is, all that's going to do is just soak up that great broth flavor, and you can get a lot more mileage out of one recipe if you added more ingredients to it. You can also add more water at the end and kind of tone down that broth since a lot of that flavor will be going into other things like the meat and things that you add. So freeze-dried pho, it's worth checking out, especially if you've never had it before or never heard of it. With that said, I would call freeze-dried pho a success. And this recipe will be going into our new cookbook, which depending on when you're seeing this video is either out or will be out soon. This is Retired at 40. Remember to live life simple. We'll catch you next week.